Well, here we go with part 2 of the critique and review for the submitted entries for the grayscale project. And again, to start this off, I have to tell you, you guys have produced some really, really fine photographs for this. And we're going to start off with a good one. The shot of Balboa Park, looking opposite of the way that most of the photographs are done. Usually they're at the other end, looking back towards the botanical house. This is a very, very nice shot. The detail is terrific. The only thing I would do is add a little more tone, bring this area down just a hair, maybe up in here where it's really, really bright, so that we can see all of the tones in that building. That would, I think, be incredibly simple to do. And maybe the easiest thing is simply we'll come over here, make our typical duplicate layer. We'll make that a multiply layer, which is much too dark. No problem. We'll drop the opacity. Now we've got more detail in that tone. If we look over here where there's none, the first question is, can we bring some back in that dark archway? I'm not sure. Maybe we can by doing the exact opposite in a next step. So let's take this. We've set it at about 25%. I'm going to flatten it. Come back, make another duplicate layer, and this time I'm going to ask for a screen layer. And what I'm noticing is I still do not have any detail in these deep arches. So the most I could do to that is turn them into kind of a gray, muddy thing. Let me look back at the darker one. I'm going to lighten some of this, so I'm going to make it a screen layer. And I'm going to use a reverse mask. Just hold down the Alt key. And now, with a white brush, I should be able to come back on some of this. I want this very soft, so I'm going to set my brush to maybe 20%, roughly right in there, close enough. We'll see right away. Oh yeah, that's about right. Maybe just a touch of a hit there, one click there. There we are. So now we've got a little more detail. I'm going to flatten this. Do a snapshot of it. And now we're pretty close. There was our original. All we did was subtly bring some of this back. But sometimes that's enough. Okay? When I said you all did some incredible stuff, I really meant that. These corrections that I'm making here are pretty subtle. But sometimes that's all you need to do. One other thing to look at in this shot is all of this stuff right down here along the leading edge. There's nothing over here you need. There's nothing over here you need. I think you would make this a little bit stronger simply by getting rid of that stuff right there. And now we have nothing distracting there in the front. Okay, let's go grab the next one. Well, this is an interesting concept piece of a shot with this pattern of rocks all jumbled around this pool, and then the pool in it that's a little bit darker. It becomes almost an abstract. And as I said in the feedback to the photographer who shot this, the only thing I would like to do is to slightly darken this pool area so that it stands out a little more from the rocks. And there's several ways we could do that. We could do our standard layer mask thing and then come in and bleed through. But let me show you an interesting layer trick that you can do. And we're going to use it as probably as simply as it can possibly be done. And the first thing I'm going to do, since it's a layer issue, is I'm going to make a duplicate layer. And now, on this top layer, I'm going to play with just parts of it. So what I want to do is, first of all, what would I really want to do? Well, I want to darken some of it. It wouldn't matter if I wanted to do a soft light or an overlay. You can see what's happening there. We're awfully close just with that. But suppose that was just a little much for it. What I can do is come down and double click on this, on the icon, and it opens up this really interesting dialog box. And the part that I want you to pay a special close attention to are these two sliders here. This is the blend if layer, or this is the blend if set of instructions. This layer is the top layer. That's the one we've got here, the underlying layer. So I want to tell it, I want you only to do this blend if the parts of this top layer are this dark or more. Can you see what happened? Here I've blended the whole thing. Here I've only blended where everything is this dark or down to black. And I could even bring that black back a little bit because it doesn't much matter. I could make a very similar thing on this bottom. If I were getting some spill, which I'm not here, I could bring this down and make a few more slight adjustments there. And now I've succeeded in darkening just one set of tones. Well, or actually in this case of adding contrast to just one of those sets of tones. So with that dialog box, you can do some very subtle, very interesting things to your image based on blending, based on tones. And depending on the image, this is a grayscale image, so it blended based on grays. But you can blend it based on other things if it's a full-scale image. So take a look at that. You might find that's pretty handy for you. Well, here's a nice close-up detail of this bike. Very, very nice. I'm assuming that that brand name is for the fairing or what? I don't know. Very cool. But it's a nice complex piece. I think it would work a little better if this area behind it were darkened down a little from the saddle over and around and back. But this area, especially in here, is really nice, especially if we could bring back a little of this tone. So let's give that a quick try. Just see if that's possible. We'll make a screen layer. Yeah, there's not much, but there is a little. So we'll make a reversed mask. We're already set up for that with a white brush. I'm going to need more than we had before. So I'm going to set my brush up to 70%. Now I can bring back just a hint of that detail. And that works pretty well. I could do the same here if I wanted to. And that would be about it. I would probably concentrate more on this area in the shot. This may be a shot, depending on the paint scheme on this, that actually is better in color. But this works pretty well. Let's go on. Oh, another city scene. This is very nice. Very cool. Lots and lots of texture. This is fascinating. This old sign on the building. Some of the stuff out in it. I don't know if this is an alley or just the back side of it. But it's really nicely done. I would lighten this door ever so slightly. And since it's black and white, I'm just going to use the dodge tool. There we go. I'd leave it at that. Couple passes at 40% and call it good. The lines are good. You've done a really, really very nice job of this. Very cool. This was particularly, and I don't mean this to downgrade the shot, but back in the 70s and 80s and all, this genre of work was very, very, very popular. It kind of followed a painting school from a much early period out of New York called the Ashcan School, where they would go into alleys and paint and do stuff like that. Photographers picked up on that and produced lots of stuff. Out of that also came the junkyard period, where photographers would go and spend lots of times in junkyards photographing detail. A nice toned image, very complete. The tones work. This sepia tone gives it, this woodsy scene, a little more feeling and depth to it. I would probably lighten this tree just a hair. It's in shadow. You don't want to lose all of that, but maybe just a hair. And I would probably do something with this little band of rocks. I've been encouraging you to do something that you really do need. I'm just using the dodge tool here to accomplish this. That is sometimes counterintuitive. There are times in some of these shots, and I'm not sure if we'll get to one quickly, but there are times when rich black, non-detailed graphic black is just perfect for the shot. And it's easy to buy into the old F64 Adams approach that shadows need to all have detail in them. They need to be what was called luminous shadows. That's true a lot of the time. There's no doubt about it. But it isn't true all of the time. So this may be one of those to where, if anything, maybe we could darken this, turn it into a bigger element. But in order to make it important, to make it clear we've done that for a purpose, we'd need to come in a whole lot closer on it. But this is very, very good start. Well, here's an image that has all of the tones. We could use a little more up here in the horizon. Let's make this into a burn tool. And subtly, I'm only at 20%, but by adding a little bit to it, we can bring that top in a little more, maybe a little down here in the spray. But the real problem is, where's the shot? Well, there's several options, but none of them are high-centered on. The spray down here is interesting. The water on the rocks here is interesting. The headland here is interesting. The fence isn't terribly interesting. But this is a nice conversion. The tones are there, but you needed to start with this and go, what am I shooting here? What's the point? What's my story? And this is a little too confusing. There are too many elements to make it a cohesive story. But technically, it's pretty well done. This is an interesting, casual outdoor portrait. And it's really pretty well done. The only thing I would do in here is see if I could separate him a little more from the tree by making the tree darker and leaving him as it is. The layer mask is an easy way to do it. If I were doing it, frankly, that's probably how I would do it. But because I introduced you to the blend if dialog. Let's see if we can make it happen there. Most of this picture we want to darken, so I'll set this to multiply. And now let's see what we can do. We'll bring up our thing. Now on the top layer, I only want to blend if I'm already in the top part. So I can end up darkening him quite a bit. Now this has so much detail, I can't resist playing with this to show you a couple of other options. So I'm going to dump this layer, get back to our original. I'm going to make a duplicate layer of it. And now I'm going to zoom in so you can really see this effect on all of this detail. Some of you in the black and white class may have had a chance to play with what's variously called a Sabatier effect or a pseudo-solarization print. And I'm not going to get into the technicalities of that because this isn't film and this is done completely differently. But we can play with this. So on this separate layer, I'm going to go into Adjustments, Curves, and now I'm going to do something bizarre. I'm going to pull this all the way down and lock the middle, and here, pull that up, pull that up. I'm going to say OK, and simply come in here to Image, Adjustments, Invert, and now we have a really interesting Sabatier effect. And if you want to bring him back to normal, here's what's cool. This would have been very difficult in film. Is we simply put a layer mask on that, go to our black brush, and we paint him back in normally. I kind of like the effect that we just did, but let's say you didn't like that. And we could put a little contrast on him. But you can create some really fascinating effects by doing this and playing with that curve design. I used an extreme curve, but you wouldn't have to. There's no rules about this. The only rule is, do you like the result? So play with some of this. You're going to find Photoshop to be unbelievably powerful to play with and fun to play with. When you're doing it, let me give you one bit of real advice, and this comes from my own experience, so this is important. When you're experimenting, write down the steps you're doing and the settings you're using at each step. Treat this exactly like a scientific experiment. If it's a complex set of steps you did, trust me, you'll see something, you'll love it, you'll immediately want to save it and show it to everyone else, and when you come back and try to do it again, you'll have no clue how you did it. You need to be able to write it down and repeat it. Think of making a little tutorial for your friends or for the class out of some effect like that. So I'm telling you, I've got a couple of images that I would dearly love to apply that technique to another shot, and I cannot reproduce it. So take a lesson from an instructor who has screwed this up in the past. Here's a very nice shot of this little step waterfall. Your shot really is in here. It's really nicely done, but we don't need this. I would either just come in, frankly, and get rid of this little, I assume it's an access for this fountain, or simply you could decide, do I need that bottom band or not? I don't know, I kind of like it with both, but I'm going to keep it there and use that. Good eye. Picked up a really good scene. And you could build up the contrast here with this water a little. Do a contrast layer using overlay, and then with a layer mask, just pick up the contrast in the water, and it'll stand out a whole lot better. Someone's been down to the Star of India. And the only problem with this is it's too dark. So it's an interesting composition of the sails and rigging, the ratlins that the poor devils climbed up. I can't imagine, really, climbing up this stuff in the middle of a gale, trying to set sails or pull in sails by hand, walking out on these. Oh, man, not me. There is or there used to be at least, a display down in the hold of the Star that gave a spar and a rope under it, and you could get out and see just how easy it might be to walk out on this, trying to hold on to this, and at the same time be pulling the sails up to wrap them and stow them. I'm telling you, it took some real courage to do that. But in this case, we just need to build some of this contrast back. I think we could do it. I'm going to try it very simply, just with a curves layer, or a curves layer, yeah. Let me see where this is. Notice that when I pull off of here, I've got the little eyedropper tool. When I hold down the Alt or Option key and click on it, a little circle appears in the curves. In this case, it is dead in the middle, right at Zone 5 middle gray. That's what this tone is. And that's the part I want to pull up. But it's really pretty much the only part I want to pull up. This actually might be a better one to use that layers blend if. But I'm going to try something here. I'm going to pull that up. Pull this back down. And now I can really put some contrast on those sails. So this one just needs a little sparkle to it. That deep sky, almost like it's been shot through a red filter, that really works well. You did a good job with that. But it's just dull. Needs to be made a little more brilliant. Okay, that's the last one. So that's it for the grayscale assignment. You did great. I'm really proud of you guys on this assignment. We're now coming up on the end. The next week is the final week, and I've given you one last project to do. You've got your final assignment to do, and then we'll be done with it. So I'll see you then. Take care.